Welcome, everyone, to this special Future Cities podcast with me, Austin Williams, Director of the Future Cities Project in London. And today we're joined by several architects and academics in Lviv, in the Ukraine. All of them are involved in understanding the future needs of their country, the regeneration, the development of the future, as well as protection and preservation of artifacts and urbanism today. So we have Maksym, Bohdan, and Yuliia. Welcome to all of you. Thank you all very much for attending this conversation. So let me just start by asking you just to introduce yourselves, a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you studied. Let's start with Maksym.
So hi, thanks a lot, Austin, that you invite me on this podcast. And I'm from Western Ukraine. I was born in Western Ukraine, studied in Lviv, and finished university here because I have studied here. So, and then in 2010, probably close to that, I was a postgraduate student, defended my dissertation in 2018, and from 2012, I was working. I started my working at the university as assistant professor. Now I'm associate professor in our department, architecture and conservation. And my interest is regeneration of historic cities, housing blocks of historic cities, and the hobby modeling. And this I love to do that, and so this is my passion.
Right, good. When you say modeling, you don't mean that you show your fashion style. You mean you make models.
Architectural scale models. Yes.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I can see Maksym. He's wearing a very stylish jacket at the moment. But look, we'll go into a bit more depth in a moment. But let me get a sense of who you all are and where you're from. So if I come to Yuliia and then Bohdan.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm originally born in Odessa on the south coast of Ukraine, and in 2019 I moved to Lviv to have my PhD thesis there. So if I calculate how many years I'm in architecture, it could be like 16 years already. I don't think I'm not the only one. I mean, like with the situation in Ukraine, I have a possibility to travel and move around Europe now. So yeah, if you ask him where I am now, I'm visiting my friends in Poland because it's Easter time and to share with them this special moment. Yeah, so it's kind of curious to see how even our friends, how even our family shift and change the cultural and traditional aspects of their lives. So just briefly update where I am and how many years I'm in architecture.
Very good. Thank you very much, Yuliia. Bohdan, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, and about me, my name is Bohdan and I'm an architect. I was born in Ternopil in Western Ukraine, and after that I studied in National University Lviv Polytechnic, and just now I am an associate professor on architectural environment department, and many years I work as an architect. My parents was architects, and maybe more than 20 years I have architectural practice. Just now I am a chief architect in my bureau A7, and 3 years I was the chairman of the associate of architects of our city and our region, and it was a very good experience for me as a public person, and for my scientific researches. It, as usual, is dedicated to public buildings and theater buildings, especially for national organization and different culture centers. That is why it's an interesting field for my research. And my PhD research work, it was dedicated to Jewish city in Ukraine.
Very good. All right. Good. That's a nice short intro. Let me ask each of you in turn just something a bit more detailed about yourself, because I've kind of read through your CVs and seen some of your presentations. So Maksym, you do research, as several of you do, into fortification. This is a quotation, the fortification of historic cities. So I'm just wondering what that means to a Western audience. Are you talking about, today's war situation, or are you talking about historical fortifications? Tell me a bit more about it.
Historical fortifications, because as I mentioned, I was born in the western part of Ukraine, in small city, Rohatin, and practically all cities in Ukraine in medieval, 17th, 16th centuries, they have to have a little bit of fortification. It was different. It could be earth fortification. It could be made of wood or stone, and it's totally different than fortification now. Even difference between fortification of 16th, 17th century and 19th century it's huge, because the different type of war, different type of guns. And now it's a different type of guns that it was in even during the Second World War. So
are there principles involved, not just the materials, but in terms of how you defend the city? Has that changed?
Yes, because at that time, that things which I'm interested in and I studied. So it's like the walls to defend from archers and like very primitive weapons. Now we have to have a distance to the enemy and stuff like that. So it's totally different. It can be used for like a fortification today.
So very quickly, since you mentioned it already, tell us about your museum architectural scale models that you do.
Yeah, my first model that I have made of fortification, it was Tusten. You've probably seen my presentation of Tusten, but it's a very interesting castle on the top of the not mountain. Mountain is made of course, yeah, but rock, and it is a wooden castle, and all the wooden constructions were built into the stone. And it was really very interesting, because we could find out what was the shape of the wooden walls, because we have marks on the stone. And this was my first scale model. I rebuilt the stone of plaster, and then I fit on the top of the castle, made of plastic this time, not wood, but it was there to show the volumetric system of this object. The most interesting part of the modeling for me is research, how it was built, when it was built, how it was changed during the time. And this is scientific work, because I also did a lot of models of like advertising models for housing, but it's not so interesting. It's just a model. You have a drawings and you make it, but yeah, only business,
So by making the model, have you understood more about how the real fortifications were used and made?
Yes, because if it's lost, this fortification, which were wooden, is from 13th, 12th century. It's not exist anymore. We have only a few remains. But when we were modeling this castle, so we find out a lot of different places we couldn't find. We couldn't know how it was built. But when you making a model, three-dimensional model, so it helps to understand how it was connected and what it should look like. Without modeling, is only with drawings, it's difficult to do.
Very good. All right. Well, look, that's good insight. Bohdan, over to you. So first of all, there's this memorial to the heroes of the Nebesna Sotnia, which I think is a very important piece of work that you've done. And then also you mentioned already this work involving Jewish and Ukrainian culture and the key issues that you found out through your research. So you want to just tell us a little bit about both of those?
As for me, it's both interesting topics, but maybe as for me, my architectural practice is a very important part of my studying practice in university, because many my students work at my bureau, and we work together. And this memorial, which you told, this memorial dedicated to the heroes who died during the European Revolution in 1913, 1914, and it was very scrum, yes, in our history, and that is why this place is very important for our city and for our country. And it was a really interesting experience because it was the architectural competitions for this place, and the winners was 3 students and postgraduate students. 2 of them was my students from university, and we worked together. And after that, we have long time for realize of this idea, and it was a very interesting time because in another city haven't such big memorial, and there are places in Ternopil and Ivano-Frankivsk, but for example in Kiev we haven't the memorial place, don't still now, and it have connection with political problems, with different economical problems, and just now it's war problems, yes, and all the public spaces stopped the realize of them, but Lviv has this good place and place for memory, because only just now we understand that all this revolution process not stopped in 2014, and it's have continued till now, and this war is continuing of these problems of our destiny, and our we want this direction to Europe, not to East, not to Russia, and we have this good way for our country and our people. And about my researches, it's not devoted exclusively to Jewish history, but it's very important scientific field. And just as for me, it's more interesting that culture building for national organizations, for national group, especially for this group who live from another country or from another nationality in nationality environment, yes, as like Jewish people in Ukrainian environment, yes, and Ukrainian people in modern empire and Austria and Hungary empire and Russian empire, and it's these connections, this influence, and in which way we can use this experience in modern building. It's very interesting for research and for different lectures, topic, books, and that is why it's interesting for me, especially nowadays.
Very interesting. I mean, you've started to talk about some of the issues that we'll come on to in the rest of the conversation. I think obviously we're talking to you in the Ukraine. We can't avoid talking about the current war situation with Russia. But let's have Yuliia just to talk about some of the work that you're doing. I mean, you're looking at the erosion and then the protection of famous sites. Tell us about your work.
Currently, I'm involved in the process of documenting cultural heritage losses, especially destruction, as you say, erosion, and sometimes just loss of the building. And just maybe clarify shortly for the audience that this process started from the very beginning of war, and the government and volunteers, they tried to collect all the information that they got in the open resources, and especially on the field, about the cultural monuments or historical monuments, or even expositions in museums, how many of them are lost or how many of them were moved to Russia, for example. There was a short question from you previously, if there is difference between the gradual change in the architectural monuments and what is the difference with wartime destruction. So they're completely different. If we are saying that it's like natural reasons of destructions, like weather, temperature, sunlight, in the wartime you have explosions, and they're mostly connected with the construction and the structural side of the monuments. And sometimes you can't even predict how it would be huge loss, or it will be just partly like decorative losses. And I think this work is now quite neat, because I think, my personal opinion, in nearest future, in nearest few years after the war, it will be really difficult to rebuild especially architectural monuments, because most of the budget, most of the money will be concentrated on housing, of rebuilding cities, infrastructure, to give people work, to give people education. And cultural monuments and maybe museum expositions will be just a symbolic objects of the wartime and the future like goal to rebuild them, to once again to restore them. And that's why it's really needed now to collect all the photos, all the drawings, all the information into huge database, first to show how much we lost during this year, and the next how much money, or how many professionals, or even like time investment we need to restore before wartime. So currently I'm working with this database. I collect photos, I collect information. I'm trying to make small descriptions of the lost monuments. As well, we are communicating with the volunteers and our friends who are now on the front line, so to get the fresh and updated information about the cultural heritage, even just historical buildings, not the monuments, just for really old buildings in the cities and villages, just to make a picture if we are losing our historical portrait, Ukrainian portrait, or we can still keep it in the future.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know whether this is a flippant question, but I think it's quite important from what you've all just been saying. In terms of what's been going on in the West, there has been a discussion about the destruction of monuments, about the rejection of history in the West, the destruction of monuments. And I just wondered what you think, because you're talking about the preservation of history, the continuity with the past and remembrance of national identity. And there's been a certain rejection of that in the West. So what's your thoughts? I'm interested in what you think.
If my colleagues don't mind, I'm going to start and give them the word after, because this database is not only with famous architectural monuments in Ukraine. We also collect data about modernism, about the 80s, 70s, 90s in Ukraine, architecture and art. It is monumental sculptures, it's monumental mosaics, also like just generally you call them monumental art, and as well as Ukrainian modernism in architecture. And it's really, it's partly ridiculous because people trying to get rid of everything about this Soviet times, like we don't need them, we don't like it, it's like we don't understand it. But at the same time you can find the really pieces of art which were created by Ukrainian artists, and this is sort of dialogue. Professionals should know much about that work, and to be a lawyer, to conquer with the audience, like for the people that know we have to save it because this is the piece of Ukrainian art, Ukrainian culture in that time, not just because it's historical. And it's really it's hard to be all the time protective with the please leave this mosaic or leave this sculpture, because this movement is really harsh, it's really quick. And sometimes the decision making is up above in the government organizations, not just around society, without any dialogue, without any round tables, what that mean or what we need in the future. So this is my point of view.
Because now you've mentioned it, it's interesting to see whether there's a rejection of Russian heritage and monuments and a protection of the Ukrainian national monuments. So how does that work for you guys? Over to you, Maksym, Bohdan.
My opinion, actually, Yulia's right in that sense that, in a lot of senses, but that it is really fast movement. But at the same time, it is like people don't want to see anything which is connects they with Russia, because Russia is totally different from us and different mentality. And very often, the monuments are interesting, it's pieces of art, but it's like for that personalities who killed Ukrainian peoples. And it was erected when it was Soviet Union, so it's sort of personalities who helped us to leave fascist Europe at that time, like that. And now it's a different view and different direction of fascism, yes. But at the same time, if that monuments are monuments like in the list of monuments, so it can be ruined like this. So I know that a lot of different monuments like that connected with the Second World War or even a little bit later, they still standing on their places, and there is some decisions of Mr. Vlada.
Authorities, local authorities.
Local authorities, yes. That it should be moved, not destroyed. It should be moved to some other place, because
in our region we have initiative that it must be open air garden, which will be called labyrinth. I don't know English labyrinth of totalitarianism, and we have museum of totalitarianism just now, and all these sculptures from Soviet period, it's conserved and stay here for future. It will be very interesting to show it as collection of these sculptures and masterpiece of different way, mosaics, pictures, drawings, and etc. And but just now it's only as initiative. It's beginning of this process, and we have many small cities where these monuments, it was single monuments in these villages and cities, and that is why it's really big problem for future. We must create new public space, new places of memory, and just now we have this war for our independence and new
identity.
Yes, and identity. It's new heroes, new soldiers, new victory, and that is why it's beginning of this process. But we must lay down, yes, all our past history.
At the same time, one point, a lot of amount of different mountains are typical in different places. A lot of Lenins, a lot of other soldiers. It's typical. It's even not made of stone. It's made of metal in the same shape
and concrete,
and maybe concrete. Yes. And so, do we need all this collection of all the same monuments? No. So that's why it's not very. The most of all monuments like that are destroying very often.
Yuliia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Bohdan just mentioned about the villages and the typical monuments, and I remember that I saw the same figure of soldier. I think in 10 or 15 the same villages, and they were all painted in gold. And I was so shocked that gold is actually, we paint the domes on the churches, like Orthodox churches, and I see the Soviet soldier painted in gold. What is the meaning? Why people in the village are so proud of it and painted in gold? And just to add, the most people want to get rid of symbols. They want to get rid of stars, hammers. They want to get rid of colors. They want to get typical molded figures in the environment. So this process is okay. I mean, it could be because it reminds them about something in the past or now in a daily basis. Because Soviet Union is shifted to Russia directly, and we can't change this association. This is the direct association. So that's why we're trying to get rid of this really small pieces really quickly, about small decoration forms and maybe coloring, but at the same time, if we are talking about the monuments of unknown soldiers or unknown I don't know, like ships and etc., it's as Bohdan say, it's a public spaces, it's the huge territories which have to be rethinking, like it should be reinterpretation of that of the places, and maybe as well as was said, we have to put in it a new meaning, this what we have now, this war, and maybe it's gonna be really good for our society in the future to communicate about this trauma.
That's really fascinating. But in terms of Odessa, obviously Odessa has I mean, there's lots of places in the Ukraine which has a link to what went on in the 1910s, 1920s in Russia, which reflects on revolutionary moment where the sailors joined the revolution, the Odessa Steps, is a very kind of classical monument, but you know, it has historical memory. So I'm just wondering what you do with those things. Do you keep it? Do you reinterpret it, or do you get rid of it?
I think, like actually Potemkin stairs, which were dedicated in the beginning of the 20th century to this ship Potemkin, last few years they tried to shift this historical legend, because previously the stairs were built as big stairs and called like Odessa Big Stairs. Some of the historians call them bridge stairs, because mostly it's a construction of the bridge. I think it's how we actually can experience history. We create new topology, new toponyms, we create new names of the same places. And for past generation, Potemkin step means something. It was something for them in their history, but now new young generation, they can't even connect these two names, and especially to the historical environment which they explore. It's really huge question, because about the destroying the Russian imperialistic history and maybe shifted to another meaning, because originally Odessa as the form of city was built by Ekaterina II, and we can't say let's destroy it, no, because there will be no Odessa at all. But at the same time, before it was a small city, Turkish Osman city, Kachibi, with a long history before. And now more important, just to connect all these historical lines, saying that before Odessa, it was a settlement and it has its own history and we have to renew it. And next that it was a period with the Russian Empire, and next Ukrainian time. And what is the future of Odessa is more importantly than to say cancel all of things like, oh no, we don't need it, we have to destroy it, because a lot of historical monuments, architectural monuments, spaces were built at that time and associated with that time. But we can't just say like let's destroy it and build a new one. Yeah, so it's that dialogue. It should be a dialogue.
Very good, very good. Okay, guys, I'm not going to come back to you on the same question. We've had a very interesting discussion about Odessa, but I can't go into every geographical region. But let me just quickly ask you, because I think a lot of people in the UK, in the West, will be surprised that you are still teaching in university. So can you just give the listeners a sense about what the impact, what the effect of the current war situation is with you in Lviv, or more generally in Ukraine?
Maybe just now we not only teaching, we have this returning to university, because it was a coronavirus crisis, and 2 years we have a meeting with our students only in online way, yes, and only just now this war period. We can visit with our first and second year students, and it's very.
The coronavirus were more dangerous than war. The first and second courses now in university.
And,
I mean,
just now we're present in university with Maksym, and as for me, it's very good opportunity because I like discuss with students. I like looking for their eyes during lectures, and that is why, as for me, it was very good time in London when we have this experience with your students. And just now we bring these interesting ideas to our colleagues, to our in our lectures, in our studying project practice. And as for me, it's not a problem, because maybe because we live in Western Ukraine and it's more safely territory, but it's very important for our students. Because just now we have diploma students who not visit practice in university, in classrooms for a long time. It's very big problem for them. And just now we have this opportunity.
Do you have many Western students attending your university?
From Western Ukraine or Western part of Ukraine?
Sorry, my language is very UK centric. Sorry, do you have any people from Western Europe?
During the period of war, so practically all international students leave Ukraine. We have some students from.
It was Morocco. I've got like a few years ago from Morocco, and I think Turkey, and mostly it's the south part of group. Arabic countries. But we have to mention that they do a really good job, because they started Ukrainian and they tried to communicate with us in Ukrainian language. So a lot of thank you for them, because it's sometimes really hard for them, and for us it's easier to work with them. I mean, like, if they know the language.
Yeah. But at the same time, they don't know English, so so it's easier for to have lessons in Ukrainian language.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I want to thank you all for speaking to me in English, because my Ukrainian is very limited. So it's very generous of you. No, I'm just interested to see about how day to day your lives are. Do you have is the war impacting on you dramatically, or are you used to it now, or what?
I mean, I will continue my thought. Now it's very similar to normal life, because I mean, now the spring, winter was really exciting, without of light, without of electricity, and autumn was really the beginning of autumn actually was quite good here in western part of Ukraine, because we didn't have at that time that massive bomb attacks, rocket attacks. The second part of autumn was really dangerous, probably, because we didn't in university we don't have so a lot of bomb shelters to keep all students inside that shelters. So this was a main problem. But at the same time, now we decided, I mean, university decided to have first two courses offline and other courses online, and this works quite good. Yeah, for us, I mean, and really to see the eyes of live students. So it's to see by your live eyes the live students in the auditorium. So it's much better, much interesting, much.
It's really important for architectures.
Yes.
Because
to show how to draw.
Theoretical, we have practical things. And we must to do model, to draw pictures, and that is why it's very important. We can't do it online.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to show by in Teams how to glue or to draw.
No, well, I'm delighted to hear it, because very often there's too many lecturers in, as I say, Western Europe, who are still keen on teaching on Teams. We don't have a war. So it's delightful to know that actually, even in your difficulties, you're still recognizing the fact that face-to-face teaching is the most important aspect. So let me quickly move on. In terms of the rebuilding, first of all, maybe some of the heritage you can explain to us as to what it is that you are identifying as some of the most important buildings. But generally, in terms of successful regeneration projects, because you are looking beyond Lviv, you are looking beyond Western Ukraine, you're looking at the aftermath of the war and the necessity for rebuilding and regeneration. So tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing in terms of understanding the needs in the future.
May I?
Please.
I just return to models.
You can speak about your models of Mariupol. It's very interesting because it connects with this.
So when the war started and Mariupol was захоплений, took by Russians. So I got an idea, but the idea was born to create the model of Mariupol, because we, with Bohdan, when Bohdan was the head of Architectural Society in Lviv, we created the model of Lviv, like the white model of Lviv, with a projection how it was developing during the time. The model, that exhibition called Death and Revival of the City, something like that. And I thought that it will be really interesting to show Mariupol in such a way, to create the model of the old city and to make a research how it was looked like before, not before the war, but when it was founded, when the core, or where the heart of this city was, and how it was took by Russian, and how it was. I'm talking in the past because I'm thinking that in the nearest future it will be the past. How it was took back by Ukrainians, by us, and
it's a good place for future, and in which way it can be look like in future time. As new city with new identity, new ideas in urbanism, and that is why it's very good place for this work too, not only about history but about future time.
In that model, we did a research with students about that city, and it was founded like in 17th century, and it was a Cossack fortress, and so. After that, it has core fortifications, and it wasn't Russian. So, and practically all of that heritage, Ukrainian heritage, were destroyed during the Russian period, and it was Russian Empire and then Soviet Union. And that same situation in probably all cities of eastern part of Ukraine, Bakhmut, the same thing. So this is really important to show how the cities were changed, how cities were maybe destroyed during the war, and this will help us to understand what the further steps will be. So like that. So that's why the researchers of the transformation of the cities during a big historical period and during the war is really needed thing to understand the identity, our identity, where it is still, what we should preserve, what we can remove, and how we can show in that situation we have our identity, let's say this way.
So how does that manifest itself? I mean, how are you demonstrating that? You're developing like design codes, certain rules for urban renewal, urban development? Is that how it works?
Sort of, but it's really difficult to do the same rules for all cities, because each city, each street, probably even individuals. So it's really difficult.
History, original history.
So principles, there are principles. A topic of few dissertations, so it's really difficult to highlight all this stuff here.
Yeah, there's never enough time to talk about these in depth. But since Yuliia, you're in Poland at the moment, yes. And I mentioned in some of the notes that this conversation about authenticity, it's a very fascinating topic in itself, but authenticity of urban renewal, what it actually means. So when you look at Warsaw in Poland, I think 85-90% of the entire city was destroyed in the Second World War, and they rebuilt it. And I was talking to a friend of mine just last week who's just come back from Warsaw, and he didn't realize that the city had been destroyed and rebuilt, because it was rebuilt exactly as it was in 1946, 47, reflecting on 100, 200 years of history. So what do you think about the idea that after wars, after, say, the Second World War, lots of Western European countries built in a modernist way to reflect a rejection of the past and the start of something new, or rebuilding to recapture history and to relive the authentic past. What do you think about those two styles of development, or two ideas? Where do you think Ukraine should go? That's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really big and complicated, because we can't say like we need the first part or we need the second part. It depends how society will react, how actually people who will return in the nearest future back home and say that I want to see my city, I want to see my home as it was, because mentally for them it's gonna be like mean something. But if you look through Poland, it's not also Warsaw, it's also Krakow, it's also Gdańsk, and Gdańsk now still in that process of rebuilding itself from the Second World War. And I think Warsaw is like a really huge political symbol, because after the Second World War, they needed to restore the country, and the symbol of the country was the heart of Warsaw. And after restoring it, even it's now look like uninhabited, it looked like more with the shops, malls and cafes, now with the people who live there. But it's a huge symbol that the country renovates itself after the long period of time. It will be also a need in Ukraine. There are some settlements which actually lost their portraits, lost the image, and for people who will return and the new generation they will be asking like, what was before war? And we have to decide, like on government level, maybe on society level, what city is going to be restored in previous way, or what cities we have to create a new like business center, industrial center, just to keep the country floating and developing. So I think it's the question mostly for urban planners, for like we call them like city builders, like urban planning projects and investments. But at the same time, we have to remember that we are working with people, with their memories, with their attitude and feelings, and because we are Ukrainians, we are combined now with a common trauma. We have to go further with the new ideas and new feelings about our future. I'm asking a lot of people around Europe and in UK as well, are they going to return? Do they want to return back? And most of them, like 99%, say yes, but I need to have a reason to come back. So what it should be, their homes or just a way of living? They want to rebuild Ukraine? I don't know, it depends privately, but most of them want to return to their previous homes, previous cities. I'm not saying about industrialization. I'm not saying about like development of the country, because there will be some points that we just need to put a new structure, new cities, new factories, and it's needed because the country should like develop. But at the same time, if we're saying about the settlements that people will just leave, it could have their special character, identity, and we have to like restore it as well, just to show that before Russian-Ukrainian war, there was history, and a huge time of history.
Very interesting. Okay, Maksym.
Yeah, sure. If you want to.
No. Sorry.
So when I was working on my dissertation, like regeneration of housing blocks of historic cities, so it was practically main conversation in that, how we should do. And actually, I find out the three main ways: totally new, totally old, rebuilding, like it's in Warsaw, yes, and combination. All of these ideas is okay, depends of the situation we have. But the less of all these ideas, I like totally new, because we forgot totally new means not only housing new, but also urban planning. it's demolish all history and destroys our memories. So this is not that idea we can use. I mean, in my opinion, at the same, to restore all we had, it will be a lie, because we lost a lot of objects, and so that's why we have to find a combination of preserving and creating a new architecture. But the core, the identity should be preserved. This is the main thing in the nations, probably, to remember who you are, who you was, what did you went through. So this also very important.
Okay, Bohdan.
For me, it's a good experience. Maybe in Dresden, we have several years of our department with cooperation with TU Dresden and the architectural faculty. And it was the period when the central part of Dresden will be rebuilt. But it was a very interesting experience, because for a long time after the World War II was passed, and for them it was a decision after the German Union, yes, Western and East part, as a period of rebuilding their history. In period DDR, yes, it's a Soviet occupation period. It was only the place with forest, with squares, and only in the beginning of 21st century it was rebuilt as a historical urban situation, but with different building. And there are building is unique reconstruction. It's not restoration, maybe it's reconstruction of historical phase, but with modern inner containers. Yes, it was modern, but it's the same scale, not the big, not the small, but in the historical scale. And there are quarters, different faces, but one big building, and it's interesting experience too, in which way we can use it. All of these places have underground parkings. It's very important for modern using. But when you go through this historical environment, you understand in which way it was looking before destroyed. In the beginning of 20th century, in the center, and it was really very important for this city. But in the beginning of 21st century, it's more than 50 years, it's 70 years, yes, go through this period. And as for me, it's a good way. Because when we speak about capital of Poland, yes, Warsaw, it was very fast. And it was decoration. It was theater way. It's not historical. It's but it's good for one way, for one place. But we have another city,
like a symbol. Yes,
yeah, like a symbol. And that is why we have this experience, and it's very interesting when Maksym told maybe this war, it's not the first war in the history. Yes, we have the same period in Lviv. There was time when Lviv was destroyed finally, but it was rebuilt, renovated, and we have our city in a new city, yes, in such way, and we love it.
Also, the same situation in Poland. They were not hurried in rebuilding of the central part of their cities, and this rush during the rebuilding the cities is the worst thing. So central part, the historical part, should wait a better time and better understanding the situation. So
that's a very, very important point. Because just very quickly, in terms of what's happening now in the conversation about the future of the Ukraine, there's, well, two things. One is that obviously Ukraine has developed a large debt, because of the war. It's borrowing and it's taking, armaments and tanks and money from America, from UK, whatever. These countries are not doing it out of love So there may be some debt. And one of the things you can see is that, you know, Norman Foster, lots of Western architects are considering how to rebuild the Ukraine after the war. I just wondered what your view is on that. You know, as Ukrainians, there you are teaching architecture, and maybe outside architects are advising you on what's best. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you mind? Do you care? Or is it a problem?
Okay. About that, it's better to lose with the smart than to find with the dumb. So we're losing, but with the smart people, with normal, with not normal, with a better society. So we find like less expenses with Russia, and we have a result now. So we pay more, but we pay for a better way of living.
Future and independence.
Yeah, this is the start.
It's worth the money.
Yeah, it's worth the money. And what connected with modern architects from Europe and Norman Foster and other people, other architects. So it's okay to understand their opinion, to understand their views on the situation, but it will be a big mistake to take this idea and apply without implementing it into our mentality and our heritage sites and society. It's good to have a lot of opinions, a lot of ideas, thoughts, but it should be our decision.
Yeah, I would say that it's better to have a media rotation, talks about Ukrainian and how, for example, in mass media, Norman Foster gonna rebuild Kharkiv and present the future project. It's good for us because it's the PR. It's like in media, they are also talking about Ukraine, but at the same time, you know, the same Sir Norman Foster has a project in Crimea, and it's really controversial because he started his building after Crimea was approached by Russians. So we can talk even just about the responsibility, social responsibility, political responsibility of architects. And personally, I think most of us gonna say, or most of my colleagues gonna say, cooperation with the European architects and European bureaus is great point for us, even for privately architectural development in our practice. It's good. But at the same time, as you mentioned, as we talked previously, how it will be integrated in the society and in Ukraine, and how it actually going to be built, because we have the examples how it's really good looking on the renders, on the pictures, and it can say, oh, you have a bright future, but when we go to practice, when we build it, it could be completely different. And as well as the usage, how Ukrainians going to use these buildings or these cities, these projects. So yeah, the collaboration is good. And integration to the people and Ukrainian society is it's more important. But it's the process. We can influence on that process.
Very good. Bohdan, you have any comments?
It's very complex questions, and because especially I have a big conversation with our colleagues, especially not only in Lviv and in the central part, from Kyiv, from Odessa, from Kharkiv, and all of them afraid that when it was money from the West, it must be developers and architects from the West, and that is why our profession maybe die in Ukraine, because it's a very big task for us work together. And that is why, especially for nowadays time, we need this conversation with our colleagues from Western Europe, and not only from UK, not only from Poland, but from USA, and maybe from eastern part of Asia, because we saw, especially maybe in such ways, in such cities as Dubai, Singapore, we need only 10, 20 years and we can destroy it all and rebuild all. But is it good for us? Maybe we need this time for understanding, for invite our people who go during this world in other countries, and their idea is good basis for this rebuilding.
Very interesting. All right, look, my final question to you. We were talking earlier about the war, and then you mentioned COVID. And for lots of people in, looking at Ukraine, we didn't think you had COVID. We just thought you had a war, So in the same way, you're talking about rebuilding, you're talking about starting new cities and what have you. Do you consider these topics of energy, environmental issues, sustainability, are they part of your conversation, or are you, that's a minor aspect, and actually rebuilding is the most important thing to do, however you have to do it?
For me, actually, now it's the sustainability and energy efficiency architecture and stuff like that now is more needed, more important with understanding what it could be look like.
This winter we understand that energy is very important, because when it was maybe, especially in Odessa, it was several days without electricity. In the winter, it's a really big problem, and we
no water, no electricity, no heat.
And that is why all the modern way of building and of living, it's very important for modern architecture. Maybe in the past time, for us, it was only very popular in Western Europe. It's very modern, yes. But just now,
fashionable.
Yes, it's maybe fashionable architecture way. But just now we understand it's maybe our future. It must to be, yes.
I agree with my colleagues, because last summer I got the summer school at Vienna Technical University, especially about Parsifal, about standards of sustainability and energy saving, and for me it was I'm sorry, just for us, mind-blowing information, because after several years in architectural design, you have your own pattern of drawing and producing projects, and when you see how many years Europe is facing with the problem of carbon neutral building, zero waste, etc. For Ukraine, for me, it was it's something really new. But now we accept that we have to build completely new structures, completely new process of building should be developed. And I'm just going to say that a lot of people now, my colleagues, my friends, are working with adapting European standards to Ukrainian building laws. And as well as some of the even developers thinking about to change the process of building. Because maybe now it's not so. I mean, today on this date is not so important. I mean, we still rebuilding and renovate housing. But in nearest future, if we're gonna build new construction sites, if we're gonna have new settlements, we have to use that European experience and European energy saving systems. And apply here in Ukraine to be more stable and sustainable. So yeah, definitely it's the main topic now in the nearest future as well.
Yes. And the last one, my last point, 1997 or 1994, when we actually lose the status of nuclear country. I mean, not lose, we just freely
present to Russia.
Yes, all our nuclear rockets went to Russia. and we were sure that we are safe because all nuclear countries will defend us. Now we understand that it was a mistake. I mean, a mistake to believe that it is safe, not to lose this power. But we can trust to our colleagues, to our neighbors, but we have to be prepared. So this understanding came only today. For other countries, probably a little bit earlier. I mean, the North countries. So they always have bomb shelters in public spaces and stuff like that. We didn't. Now probably it will go so much better. But the main reason, the main thought is we have to trust our neighbors, but we have to be prepared to different relations. This way.
I mean, there's a distinction between nuclear power and nuclear bombs. I understand the point that you're making. I would only warn, a lot of energy saving and sustainability in the Western model is very, very, very bureaucratic. So if you can avoid that part of it and just do the energy saving and the better insulation and the solar panels, then fine. So be cautious is what I would say in your development and looking to the West. All right, look, final. That was the final question, but I can ask you one more very, very swift question about what the future holds for you and the Ukraine. What's your prediction?
I don't want to predict anything, or I don't want to plan anything quite serious, because the situation in Ukraine changes day by day. Most of us, I think, keep the good and kind things in the future, as well as we will build something, that we restore something, that we're going to put ourselves in all of this rebuilding process. Especially about me, like in my nearest future, I'm starting new research project, collecting the memories and how art transforms memories into dialogue, especially with the artists in UK. So if somebody gonna listen us from Ukraine who moved to UK and is now working on their own artistic projects like sculptures, paintings, performances, dances, or filming something, I'm really kindly asked to contact with me, because I would like to know how they shifted from Ukraine to United Kingdom, what are the memories and what the kind of memories they had about Ukraine, and what they actually would like to have in the future if they come back, like qualities and character. So I'm gonna be mostly concentrated on that till summertime, and who knows, it's gonna be an exposition or it's gonna be something more interesting than just museum exposition, I don't know. So this is how I see, and mostly it's continuously working with students to set inside their minds how it will be really necessary to next few years and next generation to work with the Ukrainian heritage and Ukrainian as playground. So yeah.
Bohdan, Maksym.
I don't want to speak long, but we have this proverb says, yes, when we together, we more stronger than when we alone, and we must remember it. That is why we must be include to infrastructure of vault architecture, and that is why we must study, we must conversate with our colleagues, and I agree with Maksym.
And my small thought, I forgot my small thought, So what was the question?
No, but I'm just simply asking.
Future. Yeah.
Your future is very short. You can't remember the question.
For me, this unfortunately, all problems creates a big opportunities. Maybe it's not unfortunately, but it is like that. So this huge problem creates a lot of problems in different families in Ukraine, but at the same time, and I'm sorry about that, but at the same time, it's create an amazing opportunity for Ukraine as a country, as
peoples, nationality.
Yeah, for nation. to become united. And I think that in this way of thinking, if we will keep it, and if we will use this opportunity with destroyed city to rebuild it in a way how it was historically, but to show the Ukrainian identity. So then it will work in amazingly gorgeous way for Ukraine. So this is I'm optimistic. So like that. Thank you.
Well, optimistic and poetic. What a lovely way to finish. So look, that's the end of the conversation. Thank you very much. It's been a genuine pleasure to talk with all of you in Lviv. That's Maksym and Bohdan, and Lublin. Yuliia's in Lublin at the moment.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you all very much for your time. Wish you all every success, security, and health in the coming months. I hope everything improves. I hope the war is resolved to your satisfaction, and we can meet again in happier times in the UK or over there with yourselves. So to all of you listening, thank you all very much indeed for your time. Until the next time, goodbye.